If you're wanting to update the layout of your home, like turning a large room into 2 smaller rooms or creating a partition in an open plan area, then building framing for a non-load bearing wall is something you can do yourself. I'll show you how to do it easy as. So the framing I'm going to build is 3 metres long by 24-20 high, which is the standard height for framing. Now obviously you just want to check the dimensions of your situation. So I'm just going to draw myself a little plan so I know exactly how much timber I'm going to use. My wall's 3 metres wide and 24-20 high. So we'll need a top and bottom plate, both 3 metres long, and a stud on each end. I'm also going to allow for a door to be installed into my wall, and I'm going to place it on the end of my frame. The width of my door is 760mm, and including the jambs will make it 800mm wide. We'll also add an extra 15mm to allow it to slip into place, so that means we'll need 815mm overall to allow for the door. We'll then need studs every 600mm. If your wall is higher, up to 3 metres, your studs will need to be spaced every 400mm. As I said, the overall height of my frame is 24-20. My top and bottom plates are 45mm thick, and taking them both into account, that gives me a stud length of 23-30. So I'll be needing 6 studs at 23-30 and a top and bottom plate at 3 metres each. Now, if you've got any questions about drawing up your plan, then it's a good idea to talk to a licensed building practitioner. Okay, I've already cut my top and bottom plate to 3 metres long, so I'm just about ready to start marking out. The first thing I'm going to do is mark where my first full-length stud is going to go, and put an X there. That indicates that's a full-length stud. And the next mark is our understud. So I'm just put US on there, that indicates understud. Understuds go either side of our door frame. From there, I'm going to mark out our door width, which is 815. So I'm just going to square that across and right on there, understud. And then I'm going to come across the thickness of our framing. And then next to that, I'm going to put a cross, which indicates our full-length stud. We place studs every 600mm centres. So, to find the centre of our first stud, measure 600mm from the end. That's where we want the centre of our stud to sit. Taking into account the thickness of our framing at 45mm, we halve that, about 22mm, and we take it off our 600, which places the edge of our stud at 578. Now that we've got that, we just continue to measure every 600mm. So the first one was 578, the next one will be 1178, and so on. Now the reason why we're marking out at 600 centres, because most of our plasterboard is at 1200 wide if you wanted to fix it vertically, even though most situations now we fix all our plasterboard horizontally. So the next thing I do is mark out on both top and bottom plates exactly where I've just put all those marks. Now over this end here where our doorway is, I'm still going to mark that out only on the top plate, because obviously the bottom plate's going to get chopped out for our doorway later. On the rest of these, we'll just mark these the whole way around with a big cross on there to indicate exactly where our stud is. And obviously we'll just have one stud right on the very end. So the next thing I'm going to do is open up our top and bottom plate and just mark on the faces. So just before we start building our framing, the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to make a couple of cuts on the bottom of our bottom plate. The reason for this is this section of timber where our doorway is, that'll get cut out later on for you to put your door in. So what I'm going to do first is just make a couple of little cuts into the bottom of the bottom plate, and I'm going to cut up about 15mm. The reason I'm going to do that is because if you've got a nice polished timber floor or even a concrete floor, you don't want to scratch your floor, and also if it's a concrete floor, you don't want to blunten your teeth of your handsaw. Okay, so that's enough. That's about 15 to 20mm I've cut through the bottom of the bottom plate. Now once you've stood your framing up and you've fixed that to the ground, then you can chop through the top and you're not going to wreck your floor or your handsaw. So now we're ready to start building our framing. Okay, so I've laid out my top and bottom plate. The next thing I'm going to do is start putting in my full-length studs. So when you're cutting any framing timber, you want to make sure the timber that you're using is as straight as you can possibly find it. So first I'm just going to put our studs in on our ends of our wall. At this stage, we're not going to worry too much about getting this square. We're just going to lay in all our framing. Rightio, so now we're ready to start putting our framing together. Now I'm going to use a nail gun, but at home if you don't have a nail gun, what you want to use is 90mm flathead nails. Because it's interior, you can just use bright steel. If you have galvanised, that'll do as well. Now I've already cut my understuds. Now the understuds go either side of our doorway. To find out how long our understuds need to be, you'll need to measure up for your doorway. Our door is 1980 high, and with 20mm for the jamb, that's 2 metres. To make sure the door can swing freely, I'm allowing another 15mm for clearance, which is fine for concrete, but if you have carpet, allow 20mm clearance. I also need to add another 10mm to slip my door into the framing. So that's 2025 I need for my door. But because the understuds sit on top of my 45mm bottom plate, I'll need to take that off, making the length of my understuds at 1980. So the next thing we're going to do is start marking out where all our nogs, all our dwangs sit. Now the nogs are pieces of timber that go horizontally in between all our studs. Gives the whole frame structural integrity. So what we're going to do is mark out 800mm centres. We've got a 2.4 overall, so I'm going to put 2 sets of nogs in. So I'm going to go 778 and across. That gives me 800mm exactly to the centre of our nogs. The next one will be 1578. Now I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side, and then I'm just going to use a chalk line to ping a line to give us exactly where they all sit. Okay, just before we start measuring our nogs, what I'm going to do is just mark down on our chalk lines exactly where our nogs are going to sit. And we're just going to put a cross there so we know what side of the line that they sit on. Now we're going to start measuring for our nogs. So I know I've got 3 studs at 600mm centres. So my framing is 45mm thick, so if I take 45 off 600, that leaves me 555. So these 2 bays here should be exactly 555. So just to double check, 555, 555. So I now know I need 4 nogs at 555. So now I'll just measure in between these 2 studs. That's 180mm, so I need 2 of that. Just right on there, 180. Now, this last bay over here, I'm not going to measure these nogs at this point yet. I'm going to put these nogs all in first, and then I'll measure these 2 individually, and I'm going to make sure my outside stud is straight. So if these nogs were to be slightly too long or too short, and this stud here did have a bow inside or out, by making sure that stud is straight, we can measure these individually, and that way we always know that the outside of our frame is always going to be straight and square. Cut your nogs to size and nail them in. Now the reason why I haven't nailed in my understud yet, just so all I can do is slip my nog in, and that way I can nail in from that side there, and once they're nailed in, that way I can then nail that on. It just gives a lot more ease when putting that in, because it's very hard to get in there and put a couple of nails in on a skew. So now we're ready to start measuring our last 2 nogs. Just want to make sure that our outside stud is nice and straight. That's 528, and that's 528 too, so that's great. Now the last thing I have to do is cut our lintel. We're going to make that out of 150 by 50. Now a lintel is a horizontal member that spans an opening. In this case it is a non-load bearing wall, but it is good practice to put a lintel in over a doorway or a window anyway. So what I'm going to do is just measure in between our 2 full length studs, which is 909. I'm going to cut 2 of those, nail them together, and then slip it in. the last nog I have to put in is one just above the head on our 600 mark. So that's 225. Now the last piece of timber I have to fix in is this last understud here. Now the reason I haven't fixed that in yet is because when I stand this wall up and I butt this end up against the wall or wherever it's going, I can then just fix through our full length stud. It's a lot easier going through one thickness of timber than two. So then once this is fixed in, I will then fix that to the frame. So really the only thing I have to do now is just measure our diagonals to make sure our frame is square. So that's 38.45 and that's 38.60. So I've got 15mm difference, so I just need to halve that. So really the easiest way to fix this is by knocking this corner to squeeze that up to make sure our numbers are the same. Okay, that's nice and square. The last thing we have to do is just stand it up. There's your frame built. Now, there's a couple of different ways you could fix this down if you had a timber floor. You could use your 100mm standard nails and just fix into your joists in your floor, or what we're using nowadays, which is more standard, is these 100mm bugle screws. They've got good holding power, they're really strong, and if you wanted to, you could actually remove these nice and easy. Now, if you do have a concrete floor like this, there's a couple of different options for you. You could use your Dynabolt, or you can use your Excalibur bolt. Either one of them, you have to drill a hole and then ratchet them up nice and tight. Now, when you come to fix it to your ceiling, just make sure, obviously, that your frame is plumb and you're fixing into some solid members into the ceiling. It's always worthwhile maybe to go up to your ceiling just to make sure that you're not going to be fixing into any wires. Once your frame is fixed in place, you can then cut out the bottom plate within the door opening. It's a good idea to take a photo of the final frame and measurements for future reference. So there we have it. Now you've got some nice solid framing for your brand new interior wall.